friends, it's Michelle. Welcome or welcome back to my desk. Today we're going to be going over a sewing pattern technique that I saw in the Calico and Sylvanian Families community. Basically, I love sewing, but I'm dyslexic, which makes it very difficult to follow patterns, so I gave up on that years ago. But that being said, I've never sewn doll clothes before. I did a drop of sweaters that I crocheted in my Etsy shop last year, but I've always wanted to sew doll clothes. And for me, there were just too many hurdles until I came across this technique. But before we dive into that, I want to tell you, I started this video so that I could simply make a top for one of my dolls. After I finished making that pattern and making that top, I immediately made the pattern for this dress and created this. So I'm super happy with this technique. So let's dive in. Before getting started, I wrote down a list of everything that I was going to need just to make sure I was nice and organized. So first on the list is my doll. This is Wendy. She's my 21. Next, cling wrap, masking tape, some washable markers, graph paper, and we're set to go. Now, it's vitally important for this project that you get actual cling wrap. You don't want just plastic wrap, you want cling wrap. I originally saw this technique for writing sewing patterns being used in the Sylvanian Families / Calico Critter community, and I thought, why not use this to make clothes for other dolls? So that's what we're doing today. The first thing is, however, we're going to make sure that we protect Wendy's neck strings. So I went ahead and taped those up on the back of her head and then tied the loose ends up into her ponytail. Next, I'm just moving her arms out of the way so I can start wrapping her in the cling wrap. I went a little ham on this because this was my first time using the technique and I did maybe one too many layers of cling wrap. Really, you only need about 2 layers of the cling wrap, but you want it to cover essentially the doll's entire torso, or at least the part of the torso or limbs where you intend to create your pattern. Next, I'm going over with the masking tape. I'm going to wrap her in masking tape, basically to create a cast of her body that I can then use to write the sewing pattern. You don't need a lot of tape, you just need at least 1 really good layer. I think 2 layers is really a better idea, but you're going to place it wherever you need to draw on your pattern. So it's better to do too wide a surface than to do too small a surface and then regret it later. So I was going for a really basic little open back tank top. I know those haven't necessarily been popular for a while, but I still like them and I thought it'd be a really cute spring / summer design, and it would be an easy thing to try as a first proof of concept for this technique. So I'm just laying out the masking tape pretty much where I want the shirt itself to lay and then taking it from there. I will admit, I think I applied the tape to her a little too tightly. I recommend you want to make sure that you fully cover the doll and that you get a good cast of the body, but you don't want to do it so tight that you're compressing them and then accidentally making them smaller, because you really want, again, a very solid cast of the doll's body. So I'm just making sure that everything is nice and smoothed down before I attempt to cut the back. So I line up my scissors with the center seam of the doll's torso so that I can get a nice straight line, and I'm actually using that as my guide the entire time that I cut through. This is why I went ahead and taped up her neck strings, was to make sure that they wouldn't get cut while I was taking off the cast. So now that I have the cast off, I'm just going to go ahead and very carefully remove the tape from the back of Wendy's head. If you haven't noticed, she is covered in highlighter stains. I got her to be a project doll about 3 years ago, and I think it's just such a great way to bond with a TLC doll. But anyway, let's get back to the sewing. At this point, I'm going ahead and cleaning up the extra cellophane or cling wrap that is hanging off of the ends, because I need a really clean line from this cast, because I'm going to use the cast to actually trace our sewing pattern onto the graph paper. So now that the cast is all cleaned up and ready to go, I'm going to go ahead and draw a line straight down the center and then choose the side of the cast that I feel like came out better. And then I'm just going to use one side to draw my pattern. And then we will use that side to duplicate the other. That way everything will be symmetrical. So I'm going to go ahead and fold it down the center and then examine the two sides to see which one came out better. I went ahead and went with the right side ultimately, and then used that to later duplicate the left side. And you'll see how we do that once our pattern is actually written. So now that I've chosen the right side, I'm going to go ahead and cut the strap so that I can lay that out flat to trace into the pattern as well. Now that I've disconnected the strap from what is going to be the back panel, I'm going to go ahead and clean up the lines around that part of the cast to make sure that those lines are nice and clean so it'll be easier to trace. Now that we have our graph paper out, it is time to get to business. So instead of following the lines all the way around, what I did was I actually created dots that I then went back and connected with my ruler. I did have to freehand the curve around the arm, but other than that, I just went in with my ruler and connected all of those dots. I then went back with the pattern and realized that I had missed a couple of the lines around the strap. So I just went back and fixed those points and reconnected the lines to make sure that everything properly represented the pattern that I had cut out from the doll's cast. Once I was done with that, I started drawing out the basic seam allowance around the pattern. So the seam allowance is basically the extra fabric that you need either to fold under to make a clean line, say like at the base of a t-shirt, or it's the pieces that are connecting to one another to create the full garment, like the front and back panels. Next, I'm going over my lines with some washable marker because ultimately I want to trace this onto another piece of paper so that I have a really clean, nice sewing pattern to work from. And of course, I just want to use washable marker in case anything got anywhere. So I don't want to get permanent marker on my doll or on my clothes or on the fabric that I'm using. So you'll notice I'm actually tracing two patterns. One is the pattern with the seam allowance and the other is just the shape of the panel itself. And it will make more sense once we get to working with the fabric in just a second. So once I've finished cutting out the pattern, I'm going to go ahead and get my doll and make sure that everything fits to her properly. So this is a pretty important step. You just want to make sure that the panels that you've cut out fit where you want them to. This is an opportunity to make more adjustments, but I was happy with it. I just wanted to go ahead and double check my work. So I took out my measuring tape and measured around her torso to make sure that her torso was the same measurement as the base of the pattern. So just double checking my math, all the math mathed correctly. So I was able to move on from there. But I do definitely encourage you to do the same and check your work as you go. So next part is the fun, picking out the right fabric to suit Miss Wendy here. I checked out this blue and white pattern first. It's like a blue and white houndstooth, and then this blue and white gingham. Neither one was quite right, but this green seemed just right for Wendy. It's very spring, very summer, and it's actually one of my absolute favorite colors. So I was very happy to finally get to use this fabric. All right, so let's talk about the geometry of using a pattern like this. So you'll notice that I have the fabric folded over with what we call the bad side facing up. So that's the side that's going to be on the inside of the garment. The pattern that I've created, again, was only half of the front panel. So I've laid out the fabric so that when I cut, I'm going to cut this in duplicate, if that makes sense. So I laid the pattern down on the fold and then used my tailor chalk to go around first the seam allowance and then that second smaller pattern, which will allow me to see exactly where all of my stitches need to go. I'm then pinning everything in place to make sure the fabric doesn't move before I cut into the fabric. And once I've cut everything out and I release the fabric, the whole front panel will be there. This technique is used in traditional sewing patterns, and it allows you to be sure that both sides of your panel will be symmetrical. It's one of the very few things that I actually remember from attempting to make clothes and other things from traditional sewing patterns. But I have a terrible time trying to follow sewing patterns because I'm dyslexic. And for me, learning how to do something from the ground up is the most effective way for me to ensure that I can do it successfully. I would much rather lean into the way that I learn and the way that I process rather than trying to force myself into a pre-existing rule set. So I went in and I traced that smaller pattern onto the duplicated side just to make sure that I would have those blue chalk lines all the way around, because that is going to show me where I need to pin my fabric, either for the hem or to join to the other panel. So now I'm going ahead and pinning down everywhere that I'm going to need to sew and fitting that to Wendy first before I finish. I want to double check the actual width of the straps before I locked everything in. So now I'm fitting it to her and I was very happy with this. And this panel is the entire shirt. So what I did from there was I went ahead and sewed the hem all the way around and attached the straps in the back and a button, and let's do a reveal. All right, guys, so let's go ahead and do the reveal of our top, which is not being modeled by Miss Wendy. It's Noelle, my 118. So here is the final top. Again, I made this out of all one piece. It's like a really light flannel that I worked with. I love this fabric. I hate this fabric. I will never work with this fabric again. For this top, it is all one piece. It closes just with a button and elastic in the back, and that's it. It's so cute and perfect for summer, and I think it's adorable. It's the perfect little spring summer top, and this video by accident just happened to tie in perfectly with the timing for AG Fashion Week. So hello to AG Takes Over and AG Fashion Week. Let me know down in the comments, you guys, if you are participating in AG Fashion Week. And also, please, if you use this technique, please tag me. I want to see your creations. I am so excited for more people to get into sewing and making things for their dolls. Everything is so expensive right now, and we could all use a way to both save money and relax. And if making your own doll clothes is a way for you to do that, I highly encourage it. It's worked so well for me, and I hope it works for you. If you have any questions, leave them down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.